Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Welcome. Welcome to the series on history, science, and faith in Islam. It is designed to foster a renewal of faith based on knowledge. In the last session, we covered the impact of philosophy on intellectual developments in the world of Islam. In this session, inshallah, we will focus on the historical development of the Ja'fariya fiqh and tasawwuf and their impact on Islamic civilization. The Ja'fariya school developed autonomously and in parallel with the Sunnah schools of fiqh. And like its sister schools, its roots are in the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Although it follows an autonomous route for its sources, on most practical matters, the positions of the Sunnah schools and the Ja'fariya school are identical or similar. Indeed, on most issues, the differences in the positions taken by the Ja'fariya school and the Sunnah schools are smaller than the differences between the Sunnah schools themselves. A student of history must reject the polemical position taken by some Muslims that there are only four schools of recognized fiqh, namely Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, and Hanbali. The Ja'fariya fiqh is as legitimate as the Sunnah schools of fiqh by virtue of the historical fact that it has flourished since the time of the Prophet ﷺ and is accepted by a sizable section of the great Islamic community. Similarly, the Zaidi schools of fiqh is also historically legitimate, although we have made a conscious decision not to cover it here because it's followed by a smaller number of Muslims. The Quran accords a special place of honor to the Prophet's household. And I quote here, Allah wishes to remove from you all impurity, O members of the family, and to make you pure and without blemish. That is the Quran, Surah 33, Ayah 33. The members of the Prophet's household are referred to in the Quran as Ahlul Bayt. Sahih Hadith confirms that the term Ahlul Bayt refers to Ali radiallahu anhu, Fatimid Zahra radiallahu anha, Hassan and Hussein, as well as Aqil, Ja'far, Abbas, and their offspring. Some other hadiths refer only to Ali, Fatima, Hassan, and Hussein radiallahu anhu as Ahlul Bayt. On his return from the last pilgrimage, the Prophet stopped at a place called Ghadir Khum and declared, O people, I have left certain things. If you love them, you will never go astray. They are the book, which is like a rope extending from the heaven to the earth, and my family. In addition, ahadith from both Sunni and Shia sources also confirm the exalted position of Ali radiallahu anhu as the gateway to knowledge and heir to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And there is the hadith, Ali is to me as Aaron was to Moses, except that there shall be no prophet after me. Central to the Ja'fariya fiqh is the doctrine that the chain of authority for fiqh flows from the Quran to the Sunnah to Ahl al-Bayt, and by inference exclusive to the Imams amongst the Ahl al-Bayt. By comparison, the Sunni position accepts the chain of authority from the Quran to the Sunnah to the Ijma of the companions and is based on the confirmed ahadith. O people, I leave for you the book of Allah and my Sunnah. If you follow them, you will never go astray. And again, my ummah shall never agree upon an error. The two positions show up for the first time with extreme clarity in the question put to Ali ibn Abu Talib radiallahu anhu and Uthman bin Affan radiallahu anhu by the committee to nominate a Khalifa after the assassination of Umar ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu. The question was, will you conduct the affairs of the community in accordance with the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Sunnah of the two Sheikhs, meaning Abu Bakr and Umar? Ali radiallahu anhu answered that he would follow the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet. Uthman radiallahu anhu said that he would indeed follow the Quran, the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, and of the two Sheikhs, and was nominated as the Khalifa, demonstrating that the majority amongst the companions had accepted this position. Despite the differences in the issue of succession and of the disastrous civil wars, there were no separate schools of fiqh for the first 100 years after the Prophet. The differences were political. They were not on fiqh or the Sharia. There are many instances when Muawiyah asked for guidance from Ali ibn Abu Talib radiallahu anhu on specific issues of fiqh, even though the two were locked in bitter civil war. The Ahl al-Bayt, specifically the house of Ali and Fatimid az-Zahra, beloved daughter of the Prophet, had heard and transmitted many ahadiths directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The sayings of Ali radiallahu anhu, Nahjul Balagha, are unsurpassed as a source for Islamic ethics and teaching. The crystallization of fiqh was a cultivated discipline, and it occurred at the time of Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, who passed away in the year 765. Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq was a genius, a scholar, teacher, guide, and imam. He initiated and held halqas, meaning circles, wherein the greatest scholars of the age would gather, consult, and learn. Imam Abu Hanifa was a contemporary of Imam Ja'far and attended many of the halqas at the home of Imam Ja'far. Like Imam Abu Hanifa, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq did not write down the fiqh named after him. He was the teacher who lectured and elaborated on the principles of fiqh using the methodology of the Qur'an prevalent in early Islam. It was left to his disciples to catalog and document the teachings of Imam Ja'far. Most important of the Imamiyya writers was Muhammad ibn al-Hasan al-Qummi, who passed in the year 903. It was he who documented the doctrines of wilayat and imamat. Although both doctrines were in existence since the period of Khalifa Ali radiallahu anhu. Wilayat comes from the word wali, meaning friend, guardian, protector, master, kinsman, and is a central Shia doctrine. It affirmed that the guardianship of the Islamic community after the Prophet ﷺ must be in the hands of a wali, the first of whom was Ali ibn Abu Talib radiallahu anhu. The community must have a master, and as such, mastership must reside exclusively and uniquely with Ahlul Bayt. As God had purified the household of the Prophet ﷺ, the Imams are consequently pure and innocent and are uniquely and exclusively qualified to provide the wilayat for the community. The Ja'fariya school accepts the imamat of 12 Imams: Imam Ali, Imam Hussein, Imam Hassan, Imam Ali Zainul Abidin, Imam Muhammad Baqir, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq, Imam Musa Khazim, Imam Ali Rida, Imam Jawad Razi, Imam Hadi, Imam Hassan Askari, and Imam Muhammad Mahdi. Due to its acceptance of 12 Imams, the Ja'fariya school is referred to as Ithna Ashari, those who believe in 12 Imams. The Ja'fariya school also believes in Isma, meaning that God shields the designated Imams from sin, religious error, and forgetfulness. It is in matters of personal law that the Ja'fariya fiqh has certain differences with Sunni fiqh. In matters relating to the community, the Ja'fariya fiqh is stringent, like the Shafi'i fiqh. On issues that have no precedence, it allows for ijtihad, much like the Hanafi school, which admits the process of istihsan. The development of Ja'fariya fiqh reflects the political fortunes of the Shia movement, much as Hanbali fiqh also reflects the political circumstances of its era. After the tragedy of Karbala, the Ja'fariya movement was primarily apolitical, avoiding a head-on collision with the Umayyads. The Abbasid revolution seemed to present some hope, since the Abbasids were fellow Hashemites. These hopes were dashed as the Abbasids first took advantage of the Shias and then persecuted them even more harshly than the Umayyads. Bereft of all hope for restoring to Ahlul Bayt the political authority they deserved, the Shia movement became, except for the Fatimid interlude, increasingly introspective. However, there was no escape from the philosophical controversies raging in the 8th century. Much like its sister Sunnah schools, the Ja'fariya fiqh evolved along two broad lines during this period: the rationalist and the traditionalist. The rationalist schools evolved into the Akhbari school, which emphasized the primacy of relevant text as a source of fiqh. The acceptable texts included the Quran, Hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, and the Hadith of the Imams. The traditional schools, on the other hand, coalesced into the Usuli school and emphasized methodology and principle over textual authenticity in its approach. In its approach, the Usuli school of the Jafariya fiqh was very much like the Usuli schools of Imam Abu Hanifa and Imam Shafi'i. And like the Hanafi school, it accepted ijtihad as an acceptable methodology where there was no clear and explicit guidance from the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Thus, the Jafariya and the Sunnah schools of fiqh are like different streams taking off from the same mighty lake and watering the Islamic landscape from different directions. Their deductions are often the same because they're based on the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, although their immediate sources may be different. Fiqh built a bridge for the Islamic civilization to the future. What strikes a student of history is the confidence and enthusiasm with which the Muslims faced the ideas prevalent in the world at the time. By the 11th century, Islamic civilization had crystallized its response to its sister civilizations of the day. And this response was fundamentally different to the rational challenge of the Greeks and the spiritual challenge from the East. After a brief period of flirtation and experimentation, Greek thought was discarded and sent packing to the West. Ibn Rushd's Tahaffuz al-Tahaffuz, circa 1190, was almost a wistful goodbye of a Muslim scholar who was leaving the Islamic homeland and migrating to the Latin West. On the other hand, Islam responded to the challenge from the East by internalizing and Islamizing many of its spiritual elements. Sufi thought flourished, and after the destruction of the Mongols, took root and became the primary vehicle for the expansion of Islam. The Islamic archetype was to be a Hafiz, a Rumi, or a Shah Waliullah, rather than Al-Kindi, or Abu Ali Sina, or Al-Biruni, or Ibn Rushd. With the notable exception of Ibn Khaldun, who passed away in the year 1407, the empiricists and rationalists of the past slowly disappeared. Science and civilization thus had entirely different relationships in the West and in Islam after the Middle Ages. The West adopted Abu Ali Sina, that is Avicenna, and Ibn Rushd, Averroes as is called in Latin, and their empirical rational methods, and made science as we know it today an integral part of their culture and civilization. The Muslims increasingly turned their back on the empirical rational approach and became introverted, caught up in self-contemplation. The process accelerated in the 19th century as the Muslim world was colonized by Europe, and the historical continuity of the Muslims with their own past was severed. Those Muslims who declare that there is no conflict between science and religion in Islam must ponder over this. Having taken science out of the initial gambit, you cannot put it back in the middle game or the end game. You must change the initial gambit, namely the fundamental assumptions on which Muslim civilization has built its worldview since the debate between the Mu'tazilites and the Ash'arites in the 9th century, to come up with a coherent and comprehensive philosophy of science and civilization. With time, stagnation set in, And what was once a bridge to the future became a bridge only to the past. The schools of fiqh became madhabs and got solidified. Heredity, official sanction, political events, tribal and national royalties all played their historical part in this fixation. By the 11th century, Islamic civilization had become a city-based civilization. The Mutazilites and the Asharites had knocked the wind out of each other. The Kharis, who had wandered through the desert in the early years of Islam, teaching the Quran from hamlet to hamlet, had given way to professional teachers whose jobs depended on preserving the status quo. People longed for a break from controversies. A broad consensus developed that the existing schools of fiqh were sufficient to meet the challenges of the day. Islam had successfully withstood the onslaught of Greek thought and had successfully accommodated the spiritual challenge from Eastern religions. It appeared that the civilizational interfaces between Islam and its sister civilizations of the day had been well defined. It was now time to rest the case. The door to ijtihad was therefore closed, and people inculcated taqlid, to copy or to follow. They became Sunni, Shia, Hanafi, Maliki, Shafi'i, Hanbali, Jafari, Zaidi, and Fatimid. Political developments also contributed to intellectual stagnation. In the 9th century, the Fatimids conquered Egypt and ruled over a predominantly Sunni population. The Fatimid challenge elicited a Turkish response as champions of the Sunni fiqh. The central authority of the Caliphate disintegrated, and in its place emerged autonomous sultanates and emirates. The 16th century saw the emergence of three mighty dynasties, those of the Ottomans, the Safavids, and the great Mongols. The Safavids adopted the Jafariya fiqh, whereas the Ottomans and the Mongols championed the Hanafi fiqh. Certain ideological differences were inevitable, but madhab was often used in their mutual warfare for the control of border areas. Only geography and the relative primitive technology of the day prevented them from waging total war against each other. Nonetheless, their respective parochial policies ensured that by the 17th century, Persia was primarily Ithna Ashari, whereas India, Pakistan, Central Asia, and the Ottoman Empire were predominantly Hanafi. The last major attempt by a ruler to bring about reconciliation between Shia and Sunni madhabs was Nadir Shah. Initially a benevolent ruler, he became a miser after he sacked Delhi and made off with his great loot in 1739. Returning to Persia, he gathered the Sunni and Shia ulama in an attempt to reconcile their historic fragmentation. For this effort, both the Sunnis and the Shias abused him, which made him more of a despot. He died a miser, scornful of both Sunni and Shia ulama, and in turn scorned by history. The death of ijtihad is sometimes blamed on the Mongol and Tatar invasions. This is not historically correct. The process of stagnation was well underway before the double hammer of Crusader invasions in the 11th, 12th, 13th centuries and Mongol destructions in the 13th century, which brought an end to the Baghdad Caliphate. These external events, however, helped to consolidate the status quo. Faced with the possibility of extinction, Islamic civilization increasingly turned inwards to its own inner soul, and the mantle of intellectual leadership passed from the Qura'a and the Fuqaha to the Sufis. The major schools of fiqh clearly served the needs of early Muslims, ensured social cohesion, protected the community from the ideas of foreign civilizations, and safeguarded it during historical crises. However, the issues that were addressed reflected the condition of the Muslims at that time. In the 8th century, Islam was politically and militarily dominant in West Asia and the Mediterranean. Certainly, there was interaction with the civilizations of Greece, China, and India, but due to the primitive technology of the day, each civilization, or more or less autonomous in its own region of influence. The challenge before the Muslims was first to sort out and stabilize their own internal relationships, and then to define the relationship with the ideas from other civilizations. And this they achieved in the context of the times, separating Darul Islam from Darul Harb. Darul Islam was where fiqh was applied. Darul Harb was that other world where the infidels lived and which had to be challenged or was challenged by them. That paradigm needs re-examination. Today, fully a third of all Muslims live in countries that are predominantly non-Muslim. Fiqh is not a static tool. It is the historical dimension of the Sharia. In a shrinking world, drawn together by technology, where the information revolution has made national boundaries porous, the civilizational interfaces are different from those of the 8th and 9th centuries. In the 21st century, Islam faces not the rationalism of the Greeks, or the abnegation of the Buddhists, or the polytheism of the Vedics, but the global hegemony from a materialist civilization opposed to any form of religion. The focus of this civilization is economic centralization. In its inexorable thirst for centralization, today's global materialist civilization has co-opted science, technology, philosophy, ethics, politics, and has marginalized religion itself. The great issues of the day are primarily economic, not spiritual. Today, all people of religion, the Muslims, Christians, Jews, Buddhists, and Hindus, are in the same boat, confronted with defining their interfaces with each other and with this global materialist civilization. Clearly, a coherent response has yet to emerge from the Muslim ulama. This concludes our session on the historical development of Jafariya fiqh and tasawwuf. In the next session, inshallah, we will cover the extraordinary ebullience of science in the classical age of Islam. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.